Hello, everyone. This is Pittsburgh Pat, and I'm here with Ryan Doyle of the Verdigree Table. How are you today, Ryan?
Good. I've been called Daryl before. You're not gonna hurt my feelings.
Daryl?
Daryl. I've been called all
Daryl?
sorts of stuff. Don't worry.
Ryan Durrell? I think I was lisping Verdigree and
Yes.
Doyle and getting ahead of myself there. So that's just me trying to rush the intro. Take a deep breath, relax. This is a relaxing hour of conversation about Dungeons and Dragons. We played last night a very exciting session. Um, we were just talking a little bit before we started hitting the record button about hags. So
Hmm.
let's just jump right into it. So Brian told me they're gonna make a mega hag. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, I think an arch hag, I think is the so we're getting the new monster manual in 2 weeks from
Yes.
yesterday, and there's a CR21, I believe, hag in there. So I'm pumped because I really like hags, and I do feel like they are under underused and underpowered.
Okay.
Yeah, you can
Gotcha.
use them narratively, but once like you guys fought them, and I made it pretty scary to start.
Yep.
And okay, these are sea hags; they're not the strongest, but like it pretty quickly became clear like who was going to win that battle.
The Yeah, but only because there were some good wisdom saving throw,
Hmm.
throws on our part. So let's bring everybody out there up to speed. So we're playing the Ghost of Saltmarsh, and so sea hags are a great for the setting, right? Because ocean, and we're on an island, and there's a abandoned. I keep calling it a fortress, but it was more like a
Yeah, I mean it's a fort. It's a fort, I would
yeah,
say, like a
fort.
mini
Okay,
fortress
yeah.
that was empty for a while and
Hmm.
now is or was a like a hermitage, not quite a
Hermitage,
like
yeah.
the religious order, peaceful location. Pretty bare bones, and something happened right before you guys showed up.
Right, we were talking about this last week, how there's layer upon layer in a lot of D&D narration. Usually there's three layers of history and art or archaeology. But yeah, so we end up fighting these hags. And one of the great things about them was the way you implemented their ability to frighten the
Hmm.
player characters. So that was pretty cool. You had them, they were ugly to begin with, right? And in fact, I was going to pull a vicious mockery, or not a vicious mockery, a Tasha's hideous laughter
Hmm.
at the end, but I didn't get a chance to pull it off because the party ended up, spoiler alert, they ended up incapacitating the hag, the last hag on the battlefield. But yeah, so I was going to do a, you so ugly joke, but because I failed. My character's wisdom is very low. So I have like kind of a min-max rogue, so arcane trickster. So very good at dexterity, very good at uh, intelligence, and I also bumped his charisma stat for for social purposes. And so the the other three are terrible, right? Oh no, I didn't. No, that's not right. I bumped his constitution.
Yeah, because
So
you
that's right.
respect it, and I wouldn't even say it's min-maxed so much as it's one of
Yeah.
those subclasses where you have multiple prime ability scores. I mean,
Yeah.
intelligence, I would say, is secondary. You're not a wizard. You're like we were talking. You're like a quarter of a wizard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like something's got to give, which is I like the system. I mean, rolling for stats can be very cool, but I like the point by where you got to balance the scales, and however you're good at something, something else that's coming off of something else.
That's right. That's right. It's, like the character creation I like in Fallout, where there are these perks, but they have a downside, so
Hmm.
like, or the same thing where you have so many points to start with, you start with like a 5 out of 10 and everything, but and if you want to like, you have some extra points left over, but if you really want to like maximum them out, you have to take away some other stuff. Yeah, the point buy system in D&D I like a lot. because it's like you really want to like get up to that 17 to start with, out of the gate at level one. It's going to cost you in other
Mhm.
areas. So yeah, so wisdom is terrible for me. So I knew I was going to fail every wisdom save, and that was what happened. Is they had like a frightening presence or something like that? Is that what it was?
Essentially, I forget off the top of my
Essentially.
head, but they have an illusory. So they're these evil fey creatures from underwater. It's like the old school version of the Little Mermaid, not the Disneyfied one, right? Like this is
Yeah, mermaids weren't really they weren't beautiful in Grimm's
no,
fairy tales.
no. So they have this illusory version of themselves, which is still ugly.
Yeah.
It's not that they're putting on a super attractive shell, but they can drop that, and if you're whatever within range and can see them when that happens,
Hmm.
it's pretty horrifying, and you get afraid if you fail. And fear is punched up a little bit in the new
Yeah.
rules
I
compared to
was
the
just gonna
old
read
rules.
the new version in the
Yeah.
2024 players handbook, and it's when you have the frightened condition, you experience the following effects: ability checks and attacks affected. You have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls when the source of fear is within the line of sight, and you can't move closer to the source of fear. So actually, I misquoted this last night. I thought it was also not just, yeah, ability checks and attack rolls, but I thought it was also saving throws. So I guess it's not saving
Well,
throws.
that got confusing because that came from her. So
Yeah.
she's got I mean, now you can have male hags in 2024 too, which I like. I know people are upset about, but I just love that illustration. It gives me Billy Crystal vibes in what's his name? Miracle Max in Princess Bride a little bit. I don't know why, maybe
Yeah.
that's just me,
Yeah.
but I'm here for it. But she's imposing disadvantage. Like unless you run away and stop looking at her, you have disadvantage on this save again to shake it, which feels right to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's her like cap. That's her most powerful thing that she's bringing to the field, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's her defense, right? Is that
Yeah.
people are going to be have a tough time attacking her. It gives you kind of like a Medusa-ish feel without like
Mm.
this turn to stone kind of thing. Gives you like but what I so at one point um my character gets a couple characters saved, mine doesn't. So I was basically in three-quarter cover, I think, around a corner,
Hmm.
basically. And
Hmm.
so in and she had moved. So in order for me to be able to get line of sight on her in order to like shoot a bow or cast a cantrip or something like that, firebolt or whatnot, I would have had to have moved laterally. So so we're using a battle map. So and a map. So we, gaming it, I could have just kind of like laterally sidestepped or backed up a little bit and then been able to get line of sight and got off a shot. And you, as DM, were going to allow me to do that. That's great. But I made a decision as a player character that having the frightened condition, I would probably retreat. So what I did was I ran back into the fortress and then figured out my character would probably on the way kind of gird up a little bit, get his nerve back a little bit, and try to figure out some way to get above and away from the creature so that I didn't have to look at the hag directly again and be frightened, but still be able to like attack. So I thought that was a character choice. But I think like the way I like to play my characters is, like characters in a movie or in
Mm.
a novel, like if they have even if they have an unfortunate effect, like role play it out, you know, and um and see where that takes the narrative. Now,
And I
yeah,
respect that so much.
that might
I
leave
love,
my buddies in a bind, but they got a deal, right?
and that's what happens. I see players spend so much time. The real resource that we are worried about is like we only have so much time to play. It'd be
Yes.
great if we had more, but like in real life, we got 3, 4 hours this week. Let's make the most of it. And I see players like spend so much time trying to make the most of a round of play And like that's important when it's a real nail biter, boss fight, whatever. There's moments where you want to maximize things, but you guys are in a mode where like you're trying to conserve resources. You know that that big throwdown is coming.
Yeah,
So often it's better to go fast, have Kanda go an extra round or two, and once you like let go of that, trying to like maximize the damage per round's effectiveness of your character, you can lean into the narrative side of things, and the game is way more interesting, and combat moves much faster. The There's all this advice about how a dungeon master can make combat move faster.
yeah.
The players are 80 to 90% of the recipe. Players make your turns go faster.
Oh yeah.
One, by planning out to do something, but two, do the coolest thing. Don't. I see so many people agonizing over what the best thing to do is, or like the most different, unique thing to do is.
Yeah.
What's the cool thing in the movie? Do that. Your character wasted a turn by running. It took, I don't know, 15 seconds of real world time. And it took us longer to negotiate what the best thing to do was. Then you were like, no, I'm going to do the cool thing. And you did it.
Mm.
And then that set up a way more interesting resolution. And yeah, you had more cool scenes versus
Hmm.
like, I push the button that gives me the biggest number every time.
Hmm. Even earlier when there were we encountered three swarms of rats, which, we're level 8 characters, but they're there. And so, what are you gonna do, right? So am I gonna like do the thing with, Nick and Vex and make sure that I get sneak attack and all this sort of thing? Or am I gonna like just throw acid on them, like acid splash them or firebolt them, So, it's the great thing about having a character sheet and having all of those things on the character sheet, what good is it if you don't use them from time to time, right? So it because otherwise every rogue plays the same, right? You just
Hmm.
find out what the ultimate damage dealing device is, what the trick is, what the gimmick is, and you just use that over and over again. And that's why I switched from what I an earlier build of this character, which was more like swashbuckling, to which can be fun too, but to like the arcane trickster because I got jealous of everybody else using magic and I wanted to have a little flavor there. So, you know, put it in there, right? When it's time.
It's interesting because there's no cleric, there's
Right.
no wizard. We dropped our sorcerer. So there's a lot of like half and quarter casters. And we have a druid. We have one full caster in the party.
Hmm.
Um, and now we have a bard coming in, which is going to be interesting to see how that shifts the dynamic. But there are, yeah, a bunch of half casters and a vibrant magic market, magic item economy
Hmm.
cooking.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of stuff on the character sheet in the inventory. You guys have a lot of tricks up your sleeves. It's a fairly generous series of adventures too, as far as handing out magic items, but there's like legit, you have a relationship with someone who sells magic items. And it's not just a cool game thing that makes your characters better. It is a central, if not fully understood, plot point to the whole thing here.
Right, right. And we were talking about half casters, quarter casters, that sort of thing. So last night, one of the things we found out, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this is and doing these podcasts is to help people like kind of get through the new rules. And so as we discover them, we're sharing them with you. And yeah, so we looked up rogues, arcane tricksters. They don't have spell books or don't need spell books. They
Mm.
know their spells. They just know them. So they memorize them or, that sort of thing. So that came up because we found some scrolls and then the druid was asking about, the mechanic. We were asking about I asked about the mechanic of do you have to know the spell in order to use the scroll or does it have to be in your spell list, your class spell, your class list of spells? So meaning, if it's a druid spell, only druids can use the scroll. And you have a house rule that says no, we're anybody
Yeah.
can use the scroll.
As written, you can only use a spell scroll if it is on your classes or subclasses spell list. I don't love that. I like single-use magic items kind of being fungible. The only caveat to that is if there's a wizard in play. So we
Mm,
had a long conversation about how like wizards work and how it's almost vestigial. It's from the days when there was a magic user, right? There was no
yeah.
other, like clerics could cast spells or whatever, but like magic users had a spell book. The only way to get more spells originally was to copy them into your spell book by acquiring a scroll or, commissioning some other learned wizard to share their spells with you.
Hmm.
So if there's a wizard in the party, then I will like kind of buckle down a little bit on how scrolls work because they are kind of a vital part to the way that class functions.
Right.
But without a wizard, I think it's more interesting for like the druid, like forget about even like crafting a scroll, right? And handing it off to the paladin who's like, here, you can now cast tidal wave,
Mm.
and that's going to be very interesting strategically to, whatever. It requires planning most of the time. And it rarely makes things worse in my mind.
Yeah, and it was neat the way you described those scrolls too, as being like kind of patchwork, like handmade, like pieces of paper, like crafty kind of things.
Mm,
So that was a nice little
yeah,
flavor
I
element too. Yeah.
Magic items and treasure are always a good way to incorporate a little bit of storytelling. Like, who made this thing? How did they make it? Right? Like, this is
Mhm.
a druid on an island who's a drunk. What is that? What does that look like? So it's like, ah, yeah, this is like homespun hippie, like recycled paper. It's not super bleached. Like, you can tell it's a bunch of different like components.
Yeah, and it's not coming from a factory or a press or like, a mill, like they're not churning these things out. Like it's something that you have to actually concentrate on and imbue the magic with, and maybe even in the process of making the parchment or the vellum or whatever it is, that adds to the mystique of it. And then when it's used and destroyed, then, it becomes possibly even more special a moment because it's a unique item, not just some things,
Yeah, it's
it's
not just
actually
an index card.
right. I love me some index cards, actually. I just packed those up for teaching after school today. So, oh my gosh, we found another oil slipperiness. We've got like four of them now. So, like, we're starting to get ideas about how to use the oil of slipperiness. So, in other videos, we've talked about like kind of yeah, low level, I guess, magic items and how if they existed in the real world, like how they would still be even at that low level, they would still be game changing.
Hmm.
And so the oil slipperiness, in fact, when I got to the top of the tower, when I was frightened of the hag, I thought in order to aid the party in detaining the hag, because we wanted to capture her alive, the one I was going to try to lob one of those oils down and like create difficult terrain, and then she would have had to made a dexterity saving throw in order to not be prone. But they had so many things effects on her. We were using rings on little figurines, and she already had two rings on her, so she was already at disadvantage. I don't think they're super disadvantaged. So, but she was always, already in a place where I could have hindered her movement, which would have been good because she was trying to flee at that point. And we were talking about glee, not flee, where at one point, the
Well, the other one
monk,
made off with some treasure.
yeah, the monk threw a silver candelabra he had just found at her as a distraction. And so that halved, there were two hags originally, and one of them ran off with the treasure. So now we only have one to deal with. So, you know, that tipped the scales in our favor as well, instead of fighting two of them at once.
Yeah, you burnt her down. So I ruled it. She went to pick it up, and then it came because the monk was by himself. The monk was on the other
Hmm.
side. The monk was outside while
Yeah.
you guys were like dealing with you were in a room on the other side of this place. The monk's like, I'm gonna go check out that thing that like we failed to check out earlier that
There's like a
smelled like death.
cistern or a little man-made like Puddle Lake or something. Yeah.
Yep, and he found some treasure there, and the hags found him. And yeah, he threw the treasure to distract her, made a good, I called it persuasion. Um, I could have rolled a check on my side, but I like to put the dice in the player's hands as often as possible
Yes.
to see if she like falls for it or what
Yeah.
goes for it. And she did. And then he came around and he attacked her. And I said, well, she's essentially prone. She's bending down to pick up a thing, and you're punching her in the back of the head. Feels much different when you start saying her instead of it. But
Yeah.
the monk wailed. I think you got a shot off before she got you with the fear because you couldn't
Yeah.
see you weren't there for the first one to pop and actually hadn't come around to see the first one. So it wasn't until the second one popped. But here's something. She was bloodied. And in older versions of the game, there were morale checks to let the dice determine, is this thing going to break ranks, run away? If it hits half health, if its leader dies, what there's a bunch of different like triggers for that.
Sure.
Once in a while, in a module, not even necessarily in the Dungeon Master's Guide or something, in a module in an adventure, sometimes it'll say like this monster has a survival instinct. Surprise, surprise. So if it reaches 10% of its health, it will flee.
Yes.
It's never getting away if it has 10% of its health. Because one, attack of
Right.
opportunity. Two, if I mean from the monk, we could turn that attack of opportunity into like a whole Swiss Army
Thing.
knife of things.
Yeah.
Uh, and three, it only has so much movement speed. So I make that check at half. If it's the kind of
Hmm.
thing, not everything wants to fight to the death.
Hmm.
And she got away. She got away,
Hmm.
one, with the treasure, and two, like, who knows what? She jumped into the ocean. These things can swim and breathe underwater. So that's the only way you're going to have a recurring villain is if they get away. So give yourself way
Right.
more HP, DMs, to make that happen. The escape mechanics
Absolutely.
are not good.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, even in like the Horde of the Dragon Queen, the very first module that came out for D&D 5e back in 2014, there is a recurring villain. There are actually two. You'd have to be really clever to dispatch the first one. It's a big dragonborn. But who I think is like level 5, and the player characters are level 1, and it's like a duel or something like that. So it's designed to be set up so that the player, whichever one player challenges the Dragonborn to a duel, will be defeated, not killed, but will lose, and that's supposed to generate animosity towards this character. So the next time you see that character, you don't want to negotiate. You just want to like defeat that character. And it's a good tactic if it's pulled off. It's cool that it was written that way. But I think that's right. I think a lot of times people forget that like the monsters know what they're doing, right?
Hmm.
So like think about that. Like, yes, if it's a bunch of wasps and their nest has been attacked, yeah, they may fight to the death, you know. But rodents even like maybe but they also might flee too, because they know they're smaller, and if they're not in huge numbers, they might leave too. So that's why swarms of like rats is always more interesting than just like a giant rat, because to me, unless the giant rat can talk and has glowing eyes, and then it's bad.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, obviously. Uh, yeah, it's interesting. So I played that one pretty straight with the giant rats, even though it felt wildly unchallenging based on where you guys were, but there were some party dynamic shifts. We're missing a player. We lost
Yeah,
another player,
yeah.
someone who's coming in, but like it wasn't like a fully cooked character. So I played it as written and didn't like hit the gas. But oftentimes I will throw way more swarms and do exactly that. Have them leave at half health or attempts to flee at half health.
Hmm.
Because like it's not even like an intelligence based thing. If an animal, a freaking cougar, attacks you for a meal and determines that like, oh, you're not worth it, it bounces. It's not like it's actually like the intelligent like hobgoblins who are less likely to break ranks and fight to the death for some sort of military honor or discipline. Most things, in my estimation, are probably not going to want to fight to the death.
Right. That survival instinct is there, Yeah, exactly. So that's I try to emphasize that with the kids too, because you in a classroom environment, you're trying to like not necessarily um condone killing, you
It's
know.
a tough.
I mean, like you don't want to reward it. Sometimes it's inevitable, but man, like seventh grade boys, they just want to kill everything. And so when you have them chase it off instead of having it die, that there's a mini life lesson there, right? So it's like, you don't have to like you
And there's a
can use,
lot. There's a lot of benefits. You're saving your resources,
hmm
right? Beyond like real world, like let's not foster murder hobos and have that
right.
bleed into society.
Yeah.
But like, you guys, you chased one off,
hmm
mixed results. That wasn't like the plan, but it's what happened. And you knocked out and that kind of teed you up to knock out the other one.
Yeah.
And now you knocked out the other one, who is an intelligent.
Thing.
You don't know
Thing.
this, but you could presume this. It's a hag. It's like conniving. It's
Yeah.
something that you can negotiate with.
Yeah.
It's something that
Yeah.
may have a good deal of information for you. Like it could be
hmm
beneficial to actually have a conversation with this thing.
Yeah, but that wasn't even like, I think when we entered combat, that wasn't even a consideration. Like, we weren't thinking, like, oh, we're going to interrogate this hag. But then as the fight developed, then we decided we were going to,
Yeah.
there was an opportunity to do so. I think it was Mike that came up with it. So,
Another interesting thing in that particular scenario, which can play out and led to like the fleeing, like not just a fight to the death standard 5e combat, is that it was two hags versus the monk, who's a gnome, right? This little guy with a big bag of treasure. So they come out of these bushes and like try to get the treasure, and then you all show up, and the situation on the ground changed for them, and they went from outnumbering a foe to vastly
being
outnumbered
outnumbered, yeah.
and outgunned. And they still threw down for a while, but like something that's smart enough to realize like, oh, we're not going to win this fight. Let's live to fight another day. Is good to take that option.
hmm Absolutely. Actually, we've been considering that. So we've investigated this fort. We had been given some information from a talking seagull who whose name is Virgil, who was the familiar of the dead cleric who wrote these spell scrolls that we found, presumably. I'm
The
putting stuff
wizard. This is
together.
this
It's a
the problem
wizard.
with
Oh, okay.
depths. Yeah, the problem with like too much history, and I've
hmm
consolidated this, but
hmm
like there's a wizard, there's a cleric, there's a druid.
Oh gosh.
You're never going to meet any of them. You're dealing with the consequences of their actions.
Mhm.
I I confused
Literally,
their
their
names at one
remains
point.
at one point.
What's that?
Literally, their remains at one point. Like
Well,
they're.
interestingly enough, I mean,
Yeah.
you found some dead folks, but you haven't found a lot of bodies, and I don't think
Mm,
anyone's really considered that
hmm
yet. It's like you keep hearing about all these dead people, but like you found one body, and it was from the Periton.
Yeah, yeah. And that was probably just food for the parasite. And then, yeah, but we found a lot of blood. So,
Yeah,
and
and some
there's
teeth.
a legion and some teeth, and there's a legion of undead that are supposedly coming back. So, what's the conclusion here, right? So, Game of Thrones, like the army of the undead, like so. Anyway, the yeah, we haven't got there yet, but we know that they're coming because we've been warned by the bird. But the bird told us that like some people had taken refuge in the basement, and we didn't even know there was a basement till he said that. So we've
Hmm.
been searching for the basement, and we find it, and so now we've got from two different sources and we got a clear indication that there are a lot of undead coming. Like there were a lot the first time. So now instead of our original plan, I think was we're going to rebuild the barricades. We found these broken barricades, like the movie Aliens, where like the Marines come down, they come in. It looks like there had been a fight, and we were going to repair them, and we're going to have like be more clever and have more resources, and fight these things as they came in. And now Mike, especially the druid, was basically saying like, well, maybe we should, while they're here, we should go where they are, you know? And so the monk agreed, you know, with the Sun Tzu kind of philosophy of attack where they're weakest or where they aren't. And so that changed a lot of what my thinking was because I was just playing like, oh, this is D&D. We're going to have another large, you know, we're going to have a large set piece battle here. But, you know, that's the great thing about D&D too, is you don't have to play it like a board game. So you can just bypass that stuff. And in fact, you mentioned how a few episodes back we had bypassed a rather large battle that would have occurred with the Sharkmen, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a fairly uh open dungeon master. I would, some would say I encourage metagaming in a way. You're never supposed to let them like, know the tricks or whatever. I guess I'm a bad magician, but like after the fact, after things are settled, I will talk to the players about like what could have been, what could have happened. And there's ways to do that in story, like, but you're never going to go back that way. So you're never going to see the aftermath of this like freaking war that had been, and like you knew it was coming to. It wasn't just like surprise.
Right.
But you were like, this is not our priority or our fight. We did our part. We're out. We're doing something more interesting to us.
Hmm.
And that's awesome. One thing I did, which I really strive to do, is have when I have a situation where I have multiple NPCs in the same faction, more or less, having them have different priorities and opinions. Because
Yes.
so often when the player character, even you guys are super experienced, 4 to 5 people have run this game at the table. It's not like I'm not playing with seventh graders.
Right.
But at the same time, I, the dungeon master, am speaking in one voice. This NPC is very easily confused unconsciously with Ryan, the voice of authority, saying this is what should happen. This is like clearly the path laid out for you. So to
Mm.
have the seagulls like, yeah, these guys killed my guy. This is a fortress. Let's go to town. Let's like they snuck in the middle of the night. We know they're coming now. Let's defend this place. I will work with you if you work with me and avenge my master. Then the next session, you guys pull this. You don't get too much of her backstory yet, but you pull some people out of the basement and they're like, "Are you crazy? You're gonna
Hmm.
fight these things, right?"
Hmm.
And now it goes from the dungeon master telling you what to do to the dungeon master presenting you with choices or the story
Hmm.
presenting you. I'm taking me out of it as much as I possibly can. Hey, there's at least two paths here. Just because the pissed off seagull who you can't speak with animals on, who's actually some mercurial face spirit, with a vendetta said one thing, you can absolutely do that, but
Hmm.
that's not the only thing. I like to constantly remind the players that they have choices and I'm not railroading them one way or another.
Well, that's an advanced DMing technique too. I think, you know, you have to be, or well, it behooves you to be an experienced DM to do that because now you're creating more work for yourself. If
Sure.
you know you're going to have to be on your toes because you don't know which way the player's going to pivot. So if it's just one choice, the players will take it usually, and then you're prepared for that. If it's more than one, then you have to be ready for that eventuality. And if it's three, you know, oh my gosh. But what happens is this happens with just this is just human nature. If you only have a certain amount of information, then you're going to act on it, right? So what, you know, investigating for further information is, more intelligent thing to do. But in storytelling, like if you're reading a book and the author doesn't present you with like, it's the old complaint about like Agatha Christie mysteries, where like, you know, they introduce a character in the last 10 pages that, did the murder. Like, there's no way you could have figured that out. So, it's, I like the idea that like individual intelligent NPCs have their own motivations, and you've done that multiple times. I remember specifically we were on the island with the evil clerics or the evil like worshipers and acolytes. And there was one that was like, I just want out of here, you know.
Yeah.
I just want to get away from that guy. You know,
Yeah.
that guy's a jerk and I want off this island. And it's like, is he good? No, that guy's not good. He's still in this cult, but he just doesn't like Steve, you know, or whatever. It's like,
Hmm.
you know, but yeah, just I don't know. That makes it more interesting. It makes it fun, you know,
Yeah,
because it's more realistic.
that um scenario, which oddly paralleled this one in some ways, wink wink, had a really good job of, and it's kind of, it's in the bones of the thing. I think that's something that you used to see more of in older adventures, like the difference between NPC and monster
Yeah.
was a little less cut and dry, a little less
Mhm.
clear. Like these are people. Here's a collection of people, and they're evil, but they're also, I don't know, down on their luck, right? They're on the ropes. But they're also a threat, but they're also like, hey, you have a boat, get me out of here. I'll pay you. And this guy will come and he'll also pay you. I don't want to be on the boat with that guy though.
Yeah.
Like creating these internal conflicts.
Yeah.
Again, it gives you just more levers to pull, more ways for the story to progress. And you're absolutely right. That requires more for me. I used to think I would have to prep all of these different forks of the road, and that's true to an extent, but I'm actually like preparing myself to improvise at the table.
Yeah.
I know a much more high level view of what's going on, and then decide like cause and effect becomes much clearer only once you guys are the cause. Your choices are making things happen. And then I have enough of an understanding of like the context that I know how things will react. And when I don't, I tell you, or I pretend I go get a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom or something.
Well, no, I mean you use time in your favor as a DM. So one of the tricks of being a DM is that, as you say, the session's not going to last forever, right? So that session is 3 to 4 hours long, or could be a little shorter. And if you get to a logical point where you're just like, I haven't prepped for this. This is a good, but this is a good place to stop the narrative. You can either throw something small in there, have a small combat or have something, a scenario in there, or let the guys go shopping or let them like play with their character sheets for a while by giving them a short rest or a long rest. Um, that kind of thing. Or you can talk about backstory, you can talk about like have them find a character that gives them some what do you call it? When a character just spouts on about the plot.
Yeah, you
Um,
can do a lore dump, and I like
yeah.
the opposite, like the judo lore dump of
Hmm.
like having a character be just like having an NPC be like, what's your deal? Like
Hmm.
you're four very random people with a whole lot of crap strapped to them. Like, what is the story here?
Right.
And let the players kind of run
The
with that for a
players have
while.
to tell a little mini biography then. Yeah, which
Yeah.
is cool. So yeah, so you'll get out of that session and then have a week or however long to prepare for the next thing that the either you set up but didn't have fully fleshed out, or that the characters threw you a curveball and then you have to like react to. So yeah, it's you learn these things as you become a DM, not to stress, about that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting actually playing at the game shop. Like we have a hard out. Like 10 o'clock, the store closes, right? And like
Right.
we like this guy. A lot of us have worked in service one way or another. We respect the fact that like this guy's been here all day.
Time to
He
go home.
gets to go home. Like I'm
Hmm.
not being like whatever. That's another conversation. But
Hmm.
the idea of like you try to stick the landing as best you can, end on like a beat, on a cliffhanger, like something for the players to like ruminate on for the rest of the week
Yeah.
until the next session, or like tee up a really exciting moment to start the next session. And in other games that I've run, I've had this like 30-minute window of like, all right, like we usually stop around like 10. If we stop at 10:20, to get us to that, if I like hit the gas a little bit and push us to that roll initiative moment so we can pick up with the combat next time, like cool. I don't have that tool in my toolbox anymore. I actually have to work the other way. So last night we stopped early. We stopped at I don't know, 9:30 instead of 10, in part because we were at a good place to stop. Also in part because we were like approaching something where if we used those 30 minutes, which used to feel important to me as the dungeon master, like maximize every ounce of game time out of the available window, we would have been actually gotten to a bad place to stop, narratively and mechanically, logistically, but
Right.
potentially. I don't know exactly what would have happened, but like there's a good chance, 20 minutes in the future, oh boy, this is gonna be tough. Like we're gonna write down a page of notes to figure out how to set this up again. And
And we have a
we
regular
are
player. It's not at the table, so we don't want him missing out on like the fun too. Like, so there's that.
that's part of it. Like
Yeah.
there was a bunch of reasons. And so what happened? All right, we ended half an hour early, and we kind of just like hung out and bullshitted for 20 of those minutes,
Hmm.
and like that's cool. I
That's
didn't
part
have
of,
less fun because
yeah,
it
that's
stopped.
part of the social aspect of like, I mean, that's the whole thing. And we have a new player at the table that, I've known for years, but nobody else has. So like it's, good to like introduce, him and let him get comfortable and ask questions and, talk about just normal stuff, but also talk about D&D stuff. And so, yeah, there's so many levels to this game, and it's not a computer game, right? It's not like a single player computer game,
Hmm. Hmm.
that you're trying to beat, right? So like don't forget like part of the fun is being with other people, you know, and seeing how they react and and relating like what you're doing on the table if it does relate at all. It doesn't have to, but you can relate it to like what's going on outside of it. So yeah, it's cool stuff. Yeah, the new player, he's a bard. He rolled up a bard. It was really interesting to see like him cast his first spell. He used color spray, which
Well, he did dancing lights
oh, dancing
out
lights.
of
I
the gate.
apologize.
He
Dancing
did
lights.
dancing lights out of the gate, and he's a
Yeah.
human,
Hmm.
and he was. That's interesting. Okay, so we introduced a new player, and I should say I gave my. I think session zero is a poor choice of nomenclature.
Okay.
Right. I didn't sit down with him for a session. We didn't sit down for 4 hours and I laid out the rules of the road and he told me all of his childhood trauma. Like, no, I had a session zero for 3 minutes where I was like, all right, here's the tone of the game, right? Here's like my red lines and veils, whatever. Like, we're not gonna narrate out elaborate torture scenes. I'm not going to go into like high sexual flirtations with my NPCs. You guys want to do that? It happens off screen. Cool, whatever. If there's anything that you don't want to come up for whatever reason, let me know now or later. I like leaving that door open. And then also like explaining what kind of game like 5e leans towards a very high combat centric thing. I do what I can to add the social and the exploration elements and like bolster those so it feels like thirds, even though it's more like half combat.
Hmm.
And we are not doing super high immersion. We are not like we get deep into characters and there's like theatrical moments, but we are in a public space with a million other people,
Hmm.
100 other people, like someone who comes wanting that full immersion, never breaking character experience is not going to be happy at least this table of mine. So it's important for me to tell them right away, hey, this might not be for you. If you are trying to really explore the depths of this character, you might be disappointed here because like someone's gonna walk up to the table and make a joke about the last fucking Star Wars episode or whatever the hell. It's a
Right.
different if it's a different tone here. So I think that's important and like often gets either overstated in a way that turns people off and simultaneously like ignored by a lot of people. It's important to lay out some of that every time someone new shows up, and it doesn't have to be a 4 hour conversation.
Yeah, it's a flexibility thing, I think. And I think that's a key. element to success as a DM is having flexibility. But I do also like the fact that you just mentioned you do have some guardrails. And I didn't even think about that. But those are like my guardrails as well. So it's the type of thing where yeah, I guess that's why I feel comfortable at this table. So because in most I feel comfortable in most situations. But there were a few like um DMs that I've played with and they got into like kind of that eldritch horror kind of like element, like a kind of
Mm.
a call, not Call of Cthulhu so much. I know Call of Cthulhu is like big on that, but like kind of body horror and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I watched other people at the table kind of get a little squeamish about it. And and I had a mild reaction to it. Not I was like I could take it or leave it. Just mine was more intellectual, like this is really isn't my thing kind of thing. But it wasn't like it wasn't like I wasn't going to play as a result of it. It just was like, oh, that's not the choice I would have made. And so it's good to delineate that, especially like I'm the same way. Like the torture stuff, I'll let you go a little bit in that direction, but like we're not going to get into like uh too much anatomy.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not gonna get a breakout Grey's Anatomy and start looking at like, charts.
I've played with a lot of just a host of medical professionals, right? So like
Oh, yes,
that's
yes.
that stuff can get intense fast. And we
Mhm.
actually, so I ran Shattered Obelisk, which is that Cthulhu-y body horror vibe. And I laid that out early to make sure everyone was on board before I even, put the energy into prep the thing.
Yeah,
Like this is going to get weird. Everybody was into it, right? Because they had that separation between them and their character. And even like you saying that, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It's not
yeah,
like, hey, you describing pustules in poetic detail for 20 minutes. Like, it doesn't have to trigger a panic attack in me.
right,
It's just like, hey, this is not my idea of a fun way to spend what little free time I have in life. Like
right.
this is not the table for me. And it doesn't make you a bad person.
No,
That's somebody's favorite version of this game. Cool. But like I'm
absolutely.
not that into that. And there's three other games in this room right now. I'm gonna
Right.
go sit at one of those tables.
Yeah. And the bard that wants to seduce everything, in sight, that trope, is has been played. And yeah, it can be funny for, a few seconds, maybe even a minute, but
Mm.
then it's like, okay, enough. But you know, uh, when I mean, if I don't know, like your preteen boys, like sitting in, your one of your parents' basements, that's one thing. But we're full grown adults here, so it's time to like, kind of like you can, like you said, the fade to black thing can, that's fine. It works. We get it. You slept with the bar person. You slept with
Yeah,
the,
like
you slept with
I'll
the NPC, whatever.
I'll allow, and it's funny. I didn't even say that because he was rolling up a Bard. I probably should have
Right, right.
extra
Right. But
emphasized
it's so
that.
funny how people fall into it. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of the Tal'Dori.
Mm.
What's
Critical
the
Role.
Critical Role series it's on Netflix or
Oh,
something?
Vox Machina is the name of
Yeah,
the.
the one character, that's all he does. And it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
dang, man, like I'm you could stretch that a little bit better. I think that character could be more nuanced and maybe,
Yeah,
get
and
away from that.
he does do a turn. It's interesting.
Okay.
Not to go too deep into like Critical Role cast,
Yeah.
but he's the newest person at the tip. So talented voice actors, the Mercer effect is a whole
Oh yeah.
conversation. Like, don't, if you're gonna go shoot hoops with your friends, don't compare yourself to the NBA and
Right.
or the freaking Harlem Globetrotters, right? They're not even playing D&D anymore. I don't know what they're doing. But he was the newest person at the table, and he was like,
I didn't know that.
"What's?" And he's like, kind of he's like part of him is Scanlan's in him, right? That's like a caricature of who he is. But
Mhm.
he's like, "What's the worst? I want to be the worst thing. What is the worst possible thing?" And the guy was like, "Ah, like a gnome bard would probably be." He's like, "That's I want to be that." And then like he's a first time player. He's, whatever he is, he's in his 30s or 40s, but he's the acting out all these like 14-year-old bullshit fantasies and like just being literally trying to be the worst. And he does that for like a couple years and then like has a turn and realizes like, oh, there's so much more like potential for depth in this game. That's why I like the second season way better than the first season.
That's cool. Yeah,
But that's me.
I guess I haven't stuck with it long enough.
Well,
But
the critical I like the Critical Role campaign 2 more than campaign 1. Campaign 1 has some awesome shit. Don't get me wrong. But anyway, that's
no, that's yeah. I mean, that's the type of thing that like our viewers are gonna know about or should. There are great resources out there, and
yeah.
there's ways to see things that have been done. And but like you said about having those kind of guidelines, limits. Like I'm in a evil, in quotation marks, slightly evil Spelljammer campaign. And basically, it's not evil. We're just out for our own interests.
Mm,
And we're basically space pirates. But there was a situation where there was a NPC and we needed information from the NPC. And one of the players used like kind of a psychological terror tactic on this NPC. And I did. I actually came away from that session. I was like, that was that cool? I don't know if that was cool or not. And then the last session that I went to, like last Wednesday, we talked about it, and we were like, yeah, we don't. That was probably a boundary we found, but you don't know where the limit is, I guess, sometimes until you reach it, and then you're like, okay, we
yes.
can pull back from that.
And there's no it's different at different tables. And it's even different at different tables on different nights with the same group of people.
Yeah,
But like what you're doing with your very good friends who you've been playing this game with for a decade or decades, plural, uh, is maybe a different set of ground rules and like appropriateness than, even taking that group of people from your dining room table and plopping it in this game shop, third space, coffee shop.
yeah,
Like there is such a diversity of people in that room,
hmm
age and demographic and like neurologically that like, I might stand up and yell expletives in my dining room. Uh, and like I try not to do that. It sneaks out sometimes too. But like someone's gonna walk by that table and it might be one of your seventh graders, right?
yeah. Well, we
Uh
hear it. We hear people like playing other games and having moments of like exasperation or
yeah.
climactic moments of the game session, and then we hear those expletives being rung out, and so when you hear it on the other side, and you're like, what was that about?
Yeah. And it's cool. And
That's how you sound when you or we sound when we do, if we were to do that. I don't think we do.
I mean I don't yell them, but I
Yeah,
curse a fair. There's everyone has their like Rolodex of NPCs,
yeah,
and like several of mine come from New York. Uh, you write what you know, right? So,
right,
yeah, and I drop one fuck. You know a lot about this character right out of the gate.
right.
Uh, um, we get one. We're still PG-13. The
hmm
uh,
That's how you get the 13, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
'Cause-
again, there's nothing wrong with that. But we are playing with a rotating cast of people. It's
yeah.
different in a public setting. It's a different thing. We're constantly feeling each other out. And
Yeah.
one thing that the bard did was like new player comes to the table and was essentially observing, like was building a character, but was also like, I pulled him in more and more,
hmm
but he was essentially an audience member interning slash like we're interviewing him, he's interviewing us, we're like feeling each other out, like is this a good fit?
hmm
That's perfectly appropriate. Like
I was there, not even a year ago. When I started at the table. So like, you're just trying to figure out where the dynamic is. It's just people who are serious, they're gonna act, they're gonna play act, all the time, like you said, like total immersion, or are we joking around and having fun and And that's what I like, and that's what we do. It's okay for us to joke about, even joke about making mistakes, puns, play on words, uh, you know, just all kinds of different stuff. And it's to me that create, it's a warm, friendly environment. But also we don't want to be disruptive to the other people in the room,
Hmm.
because we've got people playing board games around us, and it's different, like you said, it's different on different nights of the week. So like tomorrow is Adventure League night. There'll be four, possibly five tables of, people playing Dungeons and Dragons that are interspersed throughout the space. So at that point, it's okay for the DM to get up and, like, full voice, like, act out these characters. It's D&D night. So, you might be a little more vociferous, in those scenarios where, it's okay to hear the other table acting things out, because everybody knows, that's what we're doing tonight. So
And I think if you're sitting there and you're listening to this conversation and you're having just like reaffirming your preferences, that's good. Sure.
mhm,
But I am a big fan of experimenting with whatever else. If you've only ever played, beer and pretzels, we're talking about Monty Python for 20 minutes. Um, that's awesome. Maybe go try, even if they're willing to let you like audit or play a one shot or whatever, dip your toe in that more immersive, theater kid, and I say that with all the love in my heart, like
yeah,
vibes.
yeah,
And if that's all you've ever done, and you take D&D very seriously, awesome. However, maybe go down to your local game shop and try a much more casual game for a night or two where, you get up, you go get a croissant, you ask the barista, who's super cool, like, hey, what record is like I just discovered a new band.
hmm
Right? Like,
hmm
okay, that's putting me in touch with reality and not the fantasy world that I'm trying to carefully craft. But like,
hmm
oh, this is cool. And like I'm having a human conversation with a stranger. And I'm getting a croissant. Like
hmm
there's benefits to both. And I am very thankful that I get to experience because like whatever. I like the variety pack. I
yeah,
have my
yeah,
intimate online game and like my home games. And like this has been a fairly new experience for me. I mean, years into it now, but like I've never played in a game shop. This game shop has vastly expanded around us, which is
it's
interesting
grown.
and cool
Yeah.
to see too. There's a great conversation on Pat's channel where we sit down with Phil.
hmm
And yeah, we go deep on a lot of different aspects of running the game shop and like what it means to like foster community. So it's just cool. It's just cool. You're gonna have a different experience with your four best friends in the basement, with the nostalgia vibes of like what you were doing 20 years ago. Yes. And also, you're going to have a different, equally rewarding in a lot of different ways experience in a big a big communal space with a bunch of people you might not know. And that means there's some different ground rules there, but you're going to lose some stuff and you're going to gain a lot more.
Yep. Yep. I couldn't said it better myself. Well, that's a great place for us to logically
Hmm.
stop this conversation. So let's do that. Everybody out there, thanks for watching, and join us next week where we'll do another recap and talk about our DM experience. And hopefully, you guys will respond in the comments. We'll answer questions. I'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.